In this Bible story of the month, we bring you Genesis 38 to Genesis 43 in all of its magnificent visual glory. These are the Genesis stories of Joseph in Egypt. So, sit back, relax, and let Joseph and the Spirit inspire you. And it came about at that time that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adullamite, whose name was Hirah. Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua, and he took her as a wife and had relations with her. And she conceived and gave birth to a son, and he named him Then she conceived again and gave birth to a son, and she named him Onan. She gave birth to yet another son, and named him Shelah. And it was at Chezib that she gave birth to him. Now Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was evil in the sight of the Lord, so the Lord took his life. Then Judah said to Onan,
"Have relations with your brother's wife and perform your duty as a brother-in-law to her, and raise up a child for your brother."
Now Onan knew that the child would not be his. So when he had relations with his brother's wife, he wasted his seed on the ground, so that he would not give a child to his brother. But what he did was displeasing in the sight of the Lord, so he took his life also. Then Judah said to his daughter-in-law Tamar,
"Remain a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up."
For he thought,
"I am afraid that he too may die like his brothers."
So Tamar went and lived in her father's house. Now, after a considerable time, Shua's daughter, the wife of Judah, died. And when the time of mourning was ended, Judah went up to his sheep-shearers at Timnah, he and his friend Hirah, the Adullamite. And Tamar was told,
"Behold, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep."
So she removed her widow's garments and covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in the gateway of Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah had grown up, and she had not been given to him as a wife. When Judah saw her, he assumed she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. So he turned aside to her by the road, and said,
"Here now, let me have relations with you."
For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said,
"What will you give me, that you may have relations with me?"
He said therefore,
"I will send you a young goat from the flock."
She then said,
"Will you give a pledge until you send it?"
He said,
"What pledge shall I give you?"
And she said,
"Your seal and your cord, and your staff that is in your hand."
So he gave them to her, and had relations with her, and she conceived by him. Then she got up and departed, and removed her veil, and put on her widow's garments. When Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adullamite to receive the pledge from the woman's hand, he did not find her. He asked the people of her place, saying,
"Where is the temple prostitute who was by the road at Enaim?"
But they said,
"There has been no temple prostitute here."
So he returned to Judah and said,
"I did not find her," and furthermore the people of the place said, There has been no temple prostitute here.
Then Judah said,
Let her keep them, otherwise we will become a laughingstock. After all, I sent this young goat, but you did not find her.
Now it was about 3 months later that Judah was informed.
Your daughter-in-law Tamar has prostituted herself, and behold, she is also pregnant by prostitution.
Then Judah said,
Bring her out and have her burned.
It was while she was being brought out that she sent word to her father-in-law, saying,
I am pregnant by the man to whom these things belong.
She also said,
Please examine and see, whose signet ring and cords and staff are these?
And Judah recognized them and said,
She is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah.
and he did not have relations with her again. It came about at the time she was giving birth, that behold, there were twins in her womb. Moreover, it took place while she was giving birth, that one baby put out a hand, and the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread on his hand, saying,
This one came out first.
But it came about as he drew back his hand, that behold, his brother came out. Then she said,
What a breach you have made for yourself.
So he was named Perez. Afterward, his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread on his hand, and he was named Zerah. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the bodyguard, bought him from the Ishmaelites, who had taken him down there. And the Lord was with Joseph, so he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. Now his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and became his personal servant, and he made him overseer over his house and put him in charge of all that he owned. It came about that from the time he made him overseer in his house and over all that he owned, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house on account of Joseph. So the Lord's blessing was upon all that he owned, in the house and in the field. So he left Joseph in charge of everything that he owned, and with him there he did not concern himself with anything except the food which he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. And it came about after these events that his master's wife had her eyes on Joseph, and she said,
Sleep with me.
But he refused, and said to his master's wife,
Look, with me here, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house, and he has put me in charge of all that he owns. There is no one greater in this house than I, and he has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do this great evil and sin against God?
Though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he did not listen to her to lie beside her or be with her. Now it happened one day that he went into the house to do his work, and none of the people of the household was there inside. So she grabbed him by his garment saying,
Sleep with me.
But he left his garment in her hand and fled, and went outside. When she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled outside, she called to the men of her household and said to them,
See, he has brought in a Hebrew to us to make fun of us. He came in to me to sleep with me, and I screamed. When he heard that, I raised my voice and screamed. He left his garment beside me and fled and went outside.
So she left his garment beside her until his master came home. Then she spoke to him with these words,
The Hebrew slave whom you brought to us came in to me to make fun of me. But when I raised my voice and screamed, he left his garment beside me and fled outside.
Now, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spoke to him, saying, See,
This is what your slave did to me.
his anger burned. So Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and extended kindness to him, and gave him favor in the sight of the warden of the prison. And the warden of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison, so that whatever was done there, he was responsible for it. The warden of the prison did not supervise anything under Joseph's authority, because the Lord was with him, and the Lord made whatever he did prosper. Then it came about after these things that the cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was furious with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. So he put them in confinement in the house of the captain of the bodyguard, in the prison, the same place where Joseph was imprisoned. And the captain of the bodyguard put Joseph in charge of them, and he took care of them, and they were in confinement for some time. Then the cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, both had a dream the same night, each man with his own dream, and each dream with its own interpretation. When Joseph came to them in the morning and saw them, behold, they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were with him in confinement in his master's house.
Why are your faces so sad today?
And they said to him,
We have had a dream, and there is no one to interpret it.
Then Joseph said to them,
Do interpretations not belong to God? Tell it to me, please.
So the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph, saying to him,
In my dream, behold, there was a vine in front of me. And on the vine were 3 branches, and as it was budding, its blossoms came out, and its clusters produced ripe grapes. Now Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, so I took the grapes and squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I put the cup into Pharaoh's hand.
Then Joseph said to him,
This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you will put Pharaoh's cup into his hand as in your former practice when you were his cupbearer. Only keep me in mind when it goes well for you, and please do me a kindness by mentioning me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this prison. For I was in fact kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing that they should have put me into the dungeon.
When the chief baker saw that he had interpreted favorably, he said to Joseph,
I also saw in my dream, and behold, there were 3 baskets of white bread on my head. And in the top basket there were some of all kinds of baked food for Pharaoh, and the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head.
Then Joseph answered and said,
This is its interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and will hang you on a wooden post, and the birds will eat your flesh off you.
So it came about on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he held a feast for all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his office, and he put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Now it happened at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh had a dream, and behold, he was standing by the Nile. And behold, from the Nile 7 cows came up, fine-looking and fat, and they grazed in the marsh grass. Then behold, 7 other cows came up after them from the Nile, ugly and thin, and they stood by the other cows on the bank of the Nile. Then the ugly and thin cows ate the 7 fine-looking and fat cows. Then Pharaoh awoke. But he fell asleep and dreamed a second time, and behold, 7 ears of grain came up on a single stalk, plump and good. Then behold, 7 ears, thin and scorched by the east wind, sprouted up after them. And the thin ears swallowed the 7 plump and full ears. Then Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. Now in the morning his spirit was troubled, so he sent messengers and called for all the soothsayer priests of Egypt, and all its wise men. And Pharaoh told them his dreams, but there was no one who could interpret them for Pharaoh. Then the chief cupbearer spoke to Pharaoh, saying,
I would make mention today of my own offenses. Pharaoh was furious with his servants, and he put me in confinement in the house of the captain of the bodyguard, both me and the chief baker. Then we had a dream one night, he and I. Each of us dreamed according to the interpretation of his own dream. Now a Hebrew youth was there with us, a servant of the captain of the bodyguard, and we told him the dreams, and he interpreted our dreams for us. For each man he interpreted according to his own dream. And just as he interpreted for us, so it happened. Pharaoh restored me in my office, but he hanged the chief baker.
Then Pharaoh sent word and called for Joseph. And they hurriedly brought him out of the dungeon. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came to Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph,
I have had a dream, but no one can interpret it, and I have heard it said about you that when you hear a dream you can interpret it.
Joseph then answered Pharaoh, saying,
It has nothing to do with me. God will give Pharaoh an answer for his own good.
So Pharaoh said to Joseph,
In my dream there I was standing on the bank of the Nile. And behold, 7 cows, fat and fine-looking, came up out of the Nile, and they grazed in the marsh grass. Then behold, 7 other cows came up after them, poor and very ugly and thin, such as I had never seen for ugliness in all the land of Egypt. And the thin and ugly cows ate the first 7 fat cows. Yet when they had devoured them, it could not be detected that they had devoured them, for they were just as ugly as before. Then I awoke. I saw also in my dream, and behold, 7 ears of grain, full and...
And Joseph said to Pharaoh,
Pharaoh's dreams are one and the same. God has told to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dreams are one and the same. The 7 thin and ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 thin ears, scorched by the east wind, will be 7 years of famine. It is as I have spoken to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. Behold, 7 years of great abundance are coming in all the land of Egypt. And after them 7 years of famine will come, and all the abundance will be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine will ravage the land. So the abundance will be unknown in the land because of that subsequent famine, for it will be very severe. Now, as for the repeating of the dream to Pharaoh twice, it means that the matter is confirmed by God, and God will quickly bring it about. So now, let Pharaoh look for a man discerning and wise, and appoint him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh take action to appoint overseers in charge of the land, and let him take 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt as a tax in the 7 years of abundance. Then have them collect all the food of these good years that are coming, and store up the grain for food in the cities under Pharaoh's authority, and have them guard it. Let the food be used as a reserve for the land for the 7 years of famine, which will occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land will not perish during the famine.
Now the proposal seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his servants. Then Pharaoh said to his servants,
Can we find a man like this, in whom there is a divine spirit?
So Pharaoh said to Joseph,
Since God has informed you of all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you are. You shall be in charge of my house, and all my people shall be obedient to you. Only regarding the throne will I be greater than you.
Pharaoh also said to Joseph,
See, I have placed you over all the land of Egypt.
Then Pharaoh took off his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and clothed him in garments of fine linen, and put the gold necklace around his neck. And he had him ride in his second chariot, and they proclaimed ahead of him,
Bow the knee.
and he placed him over all the land of Egypt. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph,
Though I am Pharaoh, yet without your permission no one shall raise his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt.
Then Pharaoh named Joseph Zaphanath-Paneah, and he gave him Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, to be his wife. And Joseph went out over the land of Egypt. Now Joseph was 30 years old when he stood in the presence of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh, and went through all the land of Egypt. During the 7 years of plenty, the land produced abundantly. So he collected all the food of these 7 years, which occurred in the land of Egypt, and put the food in the cities. He put in every city the food from its own surrounding fields. Joseph stored up grain in great abundance like the sand of the sea, until he stopped measuring it, for it was beyond measure. Now, before the year of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, bore to him. Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh.
4.
He said,
God has made me forget all my trouble and all of my father's household.
And he named the second Ephraim.
God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction.
When the 7 years of plenty which had taken place in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to come, just as Joseph had said, then there was famine in all the lands. But in all the land of Egypt there was bread. So when all the land of Egypt suffered famine, the people cried out to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians,
Go to Joseph. Whatever he says to you, you shall do.
When the famine was spread over the entire face of the earth, then Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, and the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Then the people of all the earth came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine was severe in all the earth. Now Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt, and Jacob said to his sons,
Why are you staring at one another?
Then he said,
Look, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us from that place, so that we may live and not die.
So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said,
I am afraid that harm may happen to him.
So the sons of Israel came to buy grain among those who were coming, because the famine was also in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was the ruler over the land. He was the one who sold grain to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. When Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he disguised himself to them and spoke to them harshly. He said to them,
Where have you come from?
And they said,
From the land of Canaan to buy food.
But Joseph had recognized his brothers, although they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams which he had about them, and he said to them,
You are spies. You have come to look at the undefended parts of our land.
And they said to him,
No, my lord, but your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies.
Yet he said to them,
No, but you have come to look at the undefended parts of our land.
But they said,
Your servants are 12 brothers in all, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no longer alive.
Yet Joseph said to them,
It is as I said to you, you are spies. By this you will be tested. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you and have him get your brother, while you remain confined, so that your words may be tested whether there is truth in you. But if not, by the life of Pharaoh, you are certainly spies.
So he put them all together in prison for 3 days. Now Joseph said to them on the 3rd day,
Do this and live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be confined in your prison. But as for the rest of you, go, carry grain for the famine of your households, and bring your youngest brother to me, so that your words may be verified, and you will not die.
And they did so. Then they said to one another,
Truly we are guilty concerning our brother. because we saw the distress of his soul when he pleaded with us. Yet we would not listen. For that reason this distress has happened to us.
Reuben answered them, saying,
Did I not tell you, do not sin against the boy? And you would not listen? Now justice for his blood is required.
They did not know, however, that Joseph understood, for there was an interpreter between them. Then he turned away from them and wept. But when he returned to them and spoke to them, he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. Then Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, but also to return every man's money in his sack, and to give them provisions for the journey. And that is what was done for them. So they loaded their donkeys with their grain and departed from there. But when one of them opened his sack to give his donkey feed at the overnight campsite, he saw his money, and behold, it was in the opening of his sack. So he said to his brothers,
My money has been returned, and look, it is right in my sack.
Then their hearts sank, and they turned trembling to one another, saying,
What is this that God has done to us?
When they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him everything that had happened to them, saying,
The man, the Lord of the land, spoke harshly with us and took us for spies of the country. But we said to him, We are honest men. We are not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no longer alive, and the youngest is with our father today in the land of Canaan. But the man, the Lord of the land, said to us, By this I will know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me and take grain for the famine of your households and go. But bring your youngest brother to me so that I may know that you are not spies but honest men. I will give your brother to you, and you may trade in the land.
Now it came about, as they were emptying their sacks, that behold, every man's bag of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw their bags of money, they were afraid. And their father Jacob said to them,
You have deprived me of my sons. Joseph is gone and Simeon is gone, and now you would take Benjamin. All these things are against me.
Then Reuben spoke to his father, saying,
You may put my 2 sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my care, and I will return him to you.
But Jacob said,
My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he alone is left. If harm should happen to him on the journey you are taking, then you will bring my gray hair down to Sheol in sorrow.
Now the famine was severe in the land. So it came about, when they had finished eating the grain which they had brought from Egypt, that their father said to them,
Go back, buy us a little food.
Judah spoke to him, however, saying,
The man sternly warned us, You shall not see my face, unless your brother is with you. If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you do not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, You will not see my face, unless your brother is with you.
Then Israel said,
Why did you treat me so badly, by telling the man whether you still had another brother?
But they said,
The man specifically asked about us and our relatives, saying, Is your father still alive? Have you another brother? So we answered his questions. Could we possibly know that he would say, Bring your brother down?
So Judah said to his father Israel,
Send the boy with me, and we will arise and go, so that we may live and not die, we as well as you and our little ones. I myself will take responsibility for him. You may demand him back from me. If I do not bring him back to you and present him to you, then you can let me take the blame forever. For if we had not delayed, surely by now we could have returned twice."
Then their father Israel said to them,
"If it must be so, then do this. Take some of the best products of the land in your bags and carry down to the man as a gift, a little balsam and a little honey, labdanum resin and myrrh, pistachio nuts and almonds. And take double the money in your hand, and take back in your hand the money that was returned in the opening of your sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother also, and arise, return to the man, and may God Almighty grant you compassion in the sight of the man, so that he will release to you your other brother and Benjamin. And as for me, if I am bereaved of my sons, I am bereaved."
So the men took this gift, and they took double the money in their hand, and Benjamin. Then they set out and went down to Egypt, and stood before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to his house steward,
"Bring the men into the house and slaughter an animal and make preparations, for the men are to dine with me at noon."
So the man did as Joseph said, and brought the men to Joseph's house. Now the men were afraid, because they were brought to Joseph's house, and they said,
"It is because of the money that was returned in our sacks the first time that we are being brought in, so that he may attack us and overpower us, and take us as slaves with our donkeys."
So they approached Joseph's house steward, and spoke to him at the entrance of the house, and said,
"Oh, my lord, we indeed came down the first time to buy food, and it happened when we came to the campsite that we opened our sacks, and behold, each man's money was in the opening of his sack, our money in full. So we have brought it back in our hand. We have also brought down other money in our hand to buy food. We do not know who put our money in our sacks."
But he said,
"Peace be to you. Do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has given you treasure in your sacks. Your money was in my possession."
Then the man brought the men into Joseph's house, and gave them water, and they washed their feet, and he gave their donkeys feed. So they prepared the gift for Joseph's arrival at noon, for they had heard that they were to eat a meal there. When Joseph came home, they brought into the house to him the gift which was in their hand. And they bowed down to the ground before him. Then he asked them about their welfare, and said,
"Is your old father well, of whom you spoke? Is he still alive?"
And they said,
"Your servant, our father, is well. He is still alive."
Then they bowed down again in homage. And as he raised his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, he said,
"Is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me?"
Then he said,
"May God be gracious to you, my son."
Joseph then hurried out, for he was deeply stirred over his brother, and he looked for a place to weep. So he entered his chamber and wept there. Then he washed his face and came out, and he controlled himself and said,
"Serve the meal."